I worked dispatch for a parts yard off the frontage road, the kind of place that lived on forklifts and radios and people yelling over diesel noise. It was a metal building, a row of trailers baking in the sun, and a phone that never stopped. That Tuesday, I came in like normal. I unlocked the office, kicked the old fan on, and started sorting paperwork from overnight drops. Drivers rolled in early, impatient, wanting their bills signed so they could get back on I-10. I did what I always did. I answered questions. I fixed little problems before they got big. I kept the yard moving. Around mid-morning, my supervisor, Alan, appeared in the doorway and didn't say the usual stuff. No joke, no grin. He just nodded toward the hall like he didn't want anybody to see him doing it. That small move told me I was in trouble. The conference room was cold and too clean. HR was already in there with a folder and a pen placed just right on top. Alan sat beside her but looked past me like he'd put his eyes somewhere safe and planned to leave them there until it was over. "Matt, this is about your compliance training," the HR rep said flatly, not looking up from the folder. I stared at her, waiting for the real issue. Something on the yard, a missed pickup, anything that made sense. "It was due Friday. You didn't complete it," she insisted, tapping the date like it was the only thing that mattered. My stomach did this slow turn, that training, a 10-minute video and a quiz. The email had been sitting in my inbox for weeks. I'd opened it twice and got pulled away both times. The last time I tried to finish it, the Wi-Fi in the break room dropped. I told myself I'd do it later. Then later became Friday. Friday became Monday. And apparently that checkbox was all it took. "You're firing me over a video and a quiz?" I said, and my voice came out sharper than I meant. HR didn't blink. Alan didn't look up. Nobody argued. It was like I'd tripped a sensor and the building decided I wasn't allowed inside anymore. "Policy's policy. Today's your last day," she said quietly, like she'd said it 100 times. That was it. No warning. Just a paper and a signature line. I signed because there wasn't anything else to do. I handed over my badge. I nodded through the part about my last check and when benefits ended, like I was listening, like it mattered. When I walked out, the yard felt louder. The sun felt meaner. I grabbed my lunchbox from the fridge even though I wasn't hungry. He cleared out my desk drawer and walked past people who suddenly found reasons to stare at screens. I kept my face straight the whole walk back, because that's what you do. You don't beg, you don't argue, you don't give them a scene they can retell later like you were the problem. Still, my head kept replaying the stupid details. A link, a deadline, a system that flagged me like I was a broken part on a shelf. I'd been the guy who covered shifts when someone's kid got sick. I'd been the guy who stayed late when a driver showed up at the wrong gate. None of that mattered in that room. All that mattered was the date on her paper and the empty box next to my name. My truck was sitting where it always sat, dust on the hood, heat shimmering off the windshield. I climbed in, shut the door, and just held the wheel. The cab smelled like sun-baked fabric and old air freshener. My hands were tight, knuckles pale, like I could squeeze my way back to normal. I should have sat there until my pulse slowed. I didn't. I turned the key, put it in reverse, and told myself I'd figure it out by moving. The lot was cramped, painted lines faded, trucks parked too close because nobody cared. I checked my mirrors, eased back, and felt that pressure in my chest build again. The kind that makes you want to hit something, not because you're violent, just because you need a sound that matches what's happening in your head. So I smacked the steering wheel with the heel of my hand. It wasn't hard. It wasn't a punch, just a quick, stupid slap. But my hand landed high, and the wheel jerked. At the same time, my foot eased off the brake a little. The truck rolled exactly the wrong way, and the right side of my bumper met something solid. The sound was a long scrape, slow and ugly. Metal on paint. It went on long enough for my brain to understand it, long enough for me to feel my stomach drop. Then I slammed the brake, and everything stopped. I sat there for a second, frozen, listening to my own breathing. Then I leaned forward and looked out the passenger window. A black Mercedes G-Wagon was parked tight inside the lines beside me, glossy and spotless, like it didn't belong in a dusty yard. My scrape cut across the rear quarter panel, a pale line that looked expensive just by existing. I killed the engine and got out. Heat hit me hard, and the gravel crunched under my boots. I walked around and stared at the damage like staring might make it smaller. It didn't. While it was the kind of mark that guaranteed a body shop visit, the kind that came with a number big enough to hurt. The G-Wagon's driver door opened. A man stepped out calm, not rushing, not angry in the way I expected. Early 40s, clean shirt, sunglasses, the look of somebody who planned his day and didn't like surprises. He looked at the scrape, then looked at me, like he was deciding what version of this he wanted. "You're going to want to step out and look at this," he told me, calm and clipped. He said it like I hadn't been standing there already, like he was keeping things polite by sticking to the script. "This isn't a buff out," he muttered, running a finger near the scrape without actually touching it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He had the patience of somebody who knew the rules were on his side. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. I could feel sweat sliding down my ribs. All I could think about was that folder and how I'd walked out with nothing. And now this. "I'm sorry. That was on me," I said, trying to keep my breathing even. Grant nodded once. He glanced around the lot, maybe checking who might be watching, then looked back at me. When he spoke again, it was the same calm tone, like we were negotiating a dented fence post, not a luxury truck. $4,500. You've got a week," he said, like he was stating the weather. After he said it, he reached into his wallet like this was routine. No hesitation. He slid out a business card and held it between two fingers, clean and stiff, like he'd done this before and never had to raise his voice to do it. I took it and glanced down without meaning to. Grant Hollis, black print. And simple, a number, an email. Nothing flashy, just enough to make it clear he expected to be contacted and expected to be paid. I shoved the card into my pocket like it might burn through the fabric. A week. 7 days. The number hit harder than the scrape. I did the math without wanting to. I didn't have a paycheck coming. I didn't have a cushion. I had rent and gas and groceries, and now a man with a clean shirt telling me exactly how much my bad day cost. He didn't say the word insurance, but it hung there anyway. I could have insisted on doing it the official way. I knew he was offering the opposite. Keep it quiet. Keep it simple. Pay him and this goes away. I nodded because I didn't see another move. I nodded because I was already in the hole and he was standing at the edge holding the rope. Then I got back in my truck, started it, and pulled out of the lot like I still had somewhere to be. I drove west with Grant Hollis's card in my pocket and that number heavy in my head. 4,500. 1 week. The scrape on his G-Wagon kept replaying like a sound you can't shut off. Out past Van Horn, West Texas flattened out and stayed that way. The land didn't roll. It just stretched. Low scrub, ranch fence, dry wind that leaned on the truck and made the steering feel alive. The sky was huge and blank, the kind that makes you feel watched even when there's nothing there. Semis moved in steady waves, engines humming deep enough to feel in your ribs. When they passed, my mirrors shook and the cab filled with diesel for a second. Then it was gone. I left the radio off. I didn't want a voice telling me things would work out. I just wanted the tires and the wind and enough silence to think straight. Except every time I tried, I went right back to the math, how many days I had, how much I could pull from savings without wrecking rent, how quickly I could find work that didn't start with paperwork and an orientation date. Near Balmorhea, the light softened, turning everything the color of old brass. That's when I saw the neon. A low red-orange flicker off the frontage road, half hidden behind a ranch fence. I took the exit without deciding to. The lot was gravel and dust, uneven, with a few cars parked crooked like the lines didn't matter. The building sat back from the road, squat and weathered, with a porch roof and picnic tables that had seen too many summers. A buzzing sign above the door read, "Coyote Lantern Icehouse," the letters uneven and sun-faded. Music thumped through the walls. When the door opened, beer smell spilled out, along with lime and fryer grease. A man in a dusty work shirt stumbled into the lot laughing, slapped the siding like it was a joke, and wandered toward a pickup. Nobody looked my way. That helped. I didn't want attention. I wanted a solution. A piece of plywood was mounted by the entrance. Thick marker, no logo, no phone number, just a line that didn't try to sell me anything. Night help needed. Ask inside, no pay listed, no hours. That made it feel real. If it was a scam, it would have been louder. I stood on the porch a moment before going in. My phone had one bar, then none. No messages, no missed calls, just the time and that blank screen glow. I pulled Grant's card out and looked at it under the porch light. Simple print, a number, an email. The kind of card you give people when you expect things to go your way. And I slid it back into my pocket and listened. The music inside was loud, but between beats I could hear the highway, a steady hush beyond the fence. It felt like the whole place was tucked into the dark, pretending it wasn't there. Inside, the air was cooler than outside, but still heavy with bodies and beer. Neon signs glowed in the windows. A ceiling fan turned slow, moving warm air in circles. The bar was scarred wood and old bottle rings. A couple tables were occupied. Two guys leaned over a pool table. Most people kept to themselves, like they'd come here to disappear for a while. Behind the bar, a woman wiped down glasses with quick, practiced movements. She looked up and took inventory of me in one pass. Tired eyes, no smile, not unfriendly, just careful. "You looking for someone?" Rena Calder asked, wiping her hands on a bar towel. "I saw the night help sign. I need work," I said, keeping it simple. "Talk to Caleb. He's the owner." She nodded toward the back without smiling. There was a staff door behind the bar with a keypad. Next to it hung a crooked certificate, some kind of license with a name printed at the bottom. I didn't read it at first. I just waited at the end of the bar like I wasn't sure I belonged here. Rena went back to her glasses like she'd already been sorted into a category. The music kept thumping. It was normal. It felt like the kind of normal I'd been missing all day. A minute later, the staff door opened, and the man from that license stepped out. Late 50s, gray hair cut short, shoulders squared. He looked like he'd worked ranch fences at some point and never lost the habit of watching the horizon. He didn't rush. He didn't smile. But he looked at me like I was a question. "You got a problem with being alone?" Caleb Rourke asked, like he already knew the answer. The question felt sideways, not about scheduling, about something else. I kept my face still and gave a small shake of my head. "Pays daily," he said, letting that hang in the air. "How much?" I asked, and I heard the desperation in it. $6.50 a night, cash at sunrise," he said calmly, like it was nothing. $6.50 for a bar night shift, out here, paid daily. My first thought was that I'd misheard. My second thought was that I hadn't. Caleb's face didn't have humor in it. Rena didn't react at all, but I caught the way her shoulders stayed tight, like she was waiting for me to ask the wrong thing. I did the math fast. 2 nights was $1,300. 3 nights was $1,950. With what I had tucked away, I could get close enough to that $4,500 to make the rest negotiable, if I had to. That was the hook, not the bar, not the desert, the clock in my pocket. Caleb reached under the bar and slid out a laminated page. The plastic was cloudy at the edges, corners worn like it had been handled too many times. He set it in front of me like a receipt. "Read the sheet. Follow it exactly," Caleb snapped, sliding the laminated page across the bar. I picked it up. 5 rules, short lines, specific times, specific actions, no explanations, no why. Just do this, don't do that, call a number if something happens. The wording was plain, almost boring, and that made it worse. It looked like someone had tried to write down the unthinkable without admitting it was unthinkable. I read it once. Then I read it again, slower, making sure I hadn't swapped a time or missed a word. I didn't laugh. I didn't make a joke. Caleb's eyes didn't invite it. Rena didn't look up. The place kept being a bar around me, music, clinking bottles, low voices, but the rules sat in my hands like a different kind of object, heavy in a way plastic shouldn't be. I lowered the sheet and looked at Caleb, waiting for anything. A grin, a gotcha, a normal explanation. He gave me none of that. He just watched, like the only question that mattered was whether I'd do what the paper said. I thought about my last day at work ending over a checkbox. I thought about the scrape, the business card, the deadline. Pride wasn't paying anybody. Comfort wasn't paying anybody. I needed money and I needed it now, so I nodded once, slow. Caleb took the laminated page back and tucked it behind the bar, out of sight, like it wasn't meant to live in daylight. Rena's shoulders loosened a fraction, like she'd been holding her breath without meaning to. The neon signs buzzed. The fan kept turning. People kept drinking like nothing had changed. But I stood there feeling the desert outside the walls, even with all that noise. $6.50 a night wasn't a gift, it was a price. I didn't know what I was buying yet. I just knew I was going to pay it because I didn't have a better option. I showed up for my first night shift a little before sundown, the way people do when they're trying not to look nervous. The gravel lot was fuller than earlier. Headlights pointed toward the porch, dust hanging low around tires. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, and every time it did, the shadows under the roof jumped. I told myself it was just old wiring. Inside, the place was normal. Loud music, low laughter, bottle clinks. The air smelled like beer and lime and fryer grease. A few groups were scattered around tables, boots on chair rungs, work shirts still dusty at the cuffs. That helped. A crowd meant routine. Routine meant I could get through a shift, take the money, and keep moving. Rena was behind the bar, moving fast and steady like she'd done this 1,000 times. She poured drinks, wiped spills, slid change back without looking down. When she saw me, she nodded once and pointed me to the end of the bar where I wouldn't be in the way. I tried to stay useful without hovering. I wiped tables that didn't need wiping. I gathered empties and stacked them in crates. I took out a trash bag and replaced the liner. The whole time I kept feeling that laminated sheet in the back of my mind, like a splinter I couldn't stop touching with my tongue. After the dinner rush died, Rena set a small notebook on the bar and opened it to a list in block letters. It was the basics. Lock doors on time, pull curtains, flip the open sign, bathrooms, glasses, tables, trash, cooler check. The kind of close checklist that was meant to keep you from forgetting something when you were tired. Close is close. At 1, we're done, Rena said, already exhausted, and I nodded. She didn't pause to see if I had questions. "You lock up, then bathrooms," she told me, tossing the keys once like a habit. The keys hit my palm with a warm, metallic weight. There were more of them than a place like this should need. A heavy front door key, 2 small brass ones, a couple that looked like padlock keys. I hooked the ring on my finger and tried not to stare at it like it was a weapon. Rena walked me through the close fast. Curtains first, then sign, then the door. She pointed out the latch that liked to stick unless you lifted the handle while you turned it. She told me which trash bin out back was for glass. She showed me where they kept extra liners and bleach tabs for the toilets. Then she nodded toward the back hallway. "Walk-ins down there," she said. "Just check it. Don't hang out." It wasn't the words that put me on edge. It was the way her eyes stayed serious for a beat too long, like she had almost said something else. I lowered my voice, leaning in so the room couldn't hear me over the music. "This sheet, it's for real?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Rena's jaw tightened. She didn't look at the sheet. She didn't look at me for long either. "Just do it," Rena muttered, like she didn't want the words in her mouth. Then she turned away and started pouring again. Conversation over. The night rolled forward in small, ordinary scenes. People finished drinks and paid tabs. Someone fed bills into the jukebox and the songs jumped around. A couple argued quietly near the pool table and then laughed like they were embarrassed. I stayed out of the way and kept cleaning as I went, on chasing sticky rings off tables, scooping up napkins, stacking chairs where I could. By midnight, the crowd thinned. By 1, it thinned more. The noise dropped from a roar to a steady murmur. The bar had that end-of-night look, like it was tired in the corners. Rena moved quicker, clearing space, wiping bottles, setting things right for morning. At 1:45, she called last call without raising her voice. The ones who wanted another drink came fast. The rest drifted toward the door, shoulders loose, voices low. I pulled the curtains closed over the front windows. The fabric was heavy and smelled faintly like smoke and old beer. When it covered the glass, it made the room feel smaller, like shutting eyelids. I flipped the sign from open to closed and wiped a thumbprint off the plastic. At 1 on the dot, Rena cut the music. The sudden quiet felt too big. I could hear the hum of compressors behind the walls. I could hear the ceiling fan squeak once every rotation. The last customers finished what they had, pushed back stools and left without drama. The door shut. The latch clicked. And then it was just me and Rena. She grabbed her bag from under the bar and looped it over her shoulder. No lingering, no small talk. She headed for the staff door like she'd been counting the seconds. The door closed behind her. The latch settled. Her footsteps faded down the porch, then disappeared. The place turned hollow. Not peaceful, not calm. Hollow. Like the building had been holding its breath while people were inside, and now it could finally exhale. I checked the front door lock twice and set the deadbolt. I walked the room, collecting the last glasses, wiping the bar top in long lines. I did it slowly, because moving made me feel like I was still in charge. I took a trash bag to the back and left it by the door for morning, then headed down the hallway to the bathrooms. The back hallway was cooler than the bar. Tile under my boots. Bleach smell that never fully covered stale beer. I pushed open the men's room door and flipped the switch. Fluorescent lights snapped on with a faint buzz. 3 stalls, 2 urinals, a long mirror with water spots that never came off. It looked normal until I heard it. A low sound, not quite a snore, more like a wet exhale. I froze with my hand still on the door. I waited. It came again, soft from the last stall. "Hey, anyone still in here?" I called out, my voice bouncing off tile and mirrors. No answer, just a small shift, like someone moved on the other side of a door. I stepped in and saw boots under the last stall, dust on the toes. The person inside wasn't sitting upright. He was slumped, leaning into the corner. I knocked once, then harder, because the idea of reaching for the latch made my skin crawl. "Come on, man, we're closed," I said, knocking on the stall door. A slow breath, a scrape, then a voice thick with sleep and alcohol. "I'm good. Just a minute." The guy in the stall slurred, half asleep. His ID had said Travis Halen. I kept repeating it in my head like it would make him easier to steer. The bar behind me felt farther away than it should have. The hallway felt longer. The quiet felt wrong, like it was waiting for me to do the next thing. I hit the stall door again, sharper because waiting suddenly felt like the wrong move. "No. You're getting up now," I snapped, because something about the quiet felt wrong. I got the stall door open and hauled him out by the back of his shirt before he could fold back onto the toilet. He was heavy in that loose way drunk people get, like their bones don't want to cooperate. He blinked at the fluorescent lights, squinted, and tried to smile like he'd been caught doing something funny. I didn't laugh. I walked him out of the men's room and sat him on a chair in the hallway, then filled a plastic cup at the bar sink and brought it back. He drank a little, coughed, and wiped his mouth on his sleeve. I pointed him toward the front. The front door was only 30 feet away. All he had to do was stand up and walk straight. He didn't. He leaned forward like he was listening, then slid off the chair and started drifting toward the back corner instead. To the utility side of the building where the ice machine sat beside a metal sink and a floor drain that always held a shallow, dark puddle. His eyes weren't on anything. They were past everything. That's when it hit me. How different the place felt with the doors locked. The moment the latch had clicked behind Rena, the bar stopped being a bar. The noise outside didn't just get quieter. It felt cut off. The highway hiss faded into nothing. Even the air felt thicker, like the room had sealed itself shut and decided it only belonged to whoever was still inside. I stepped in front of him and tried to steer him back toward the door. He brushed my shoulder and kept moving, gentle but stubborn. Not stubborn like a drunk picking a fight. Stubborn like a compass needle. His lips moved. "Blue, salt," Travis muttered, like he was reading it off a sign only he could see. My stomach dropped. The rules flashed in my mind like a warning light. "Stop saying that," I snapped, way too fast. He didn't flinch. He stared past me toward the dark window where the curtains didn't quite meet at the bottom. "You hear that? Somebody's out there," he insisted, staring past me instead of at me. I listened. At first there was only the hum of coolers and my own breathing. Then I caught it. A faint, even clicking, like someone tapping a metal pen against a desk. Not random, measured, and underneath it something thinner, like static trying to form words. I got him back into the chair by sheer force and planted my palm on his shoulder. "No, sit down," I said, trying to stay calm even as my skin went tight. He sat, but his gaze stayed fixed on the back corner. So I went behind the bar and pulled the laminated sheet from where Caleb had stashed it. I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't need to. I checked the first rule and looked at my phone. 1:12 a.m. My throat went dry. I found the switch for the jukebox power and the breaker Caleb had pointed out for the porch neon. My hand hovered for half a second, then I did it. At 1:13, the jukebox went dead, and the porch neon dropped out. The bar didn't just get darker, it got wrong. The hum of the coolers sounded farther away, like it had moved down a long hallway. The clicking grew louder, coming from no single spot. It felt like it was inside the walls. A flat murmur slid under it, syllables without shape, the cadence of a voice with the meaning stripped out. Travis's head turned toward the back like something had called him by name. He stood up again. Faster this time, chair-scraping tile. I moved to block him. He swayed around me anyway, and for a second, I saw fear on his face, sharp and clear, like the alcohol had burned off in one instant. The ice machine thumped. Then it kicked on with a grinding sound and started spitting cubes into the bin. Steam rose off them in thin curls. The smell that followed was sweet and sharp, like chemicals warmed under a lamp. Travis stepped closer, mesmerized. He lifted the bin lid and reached in with bare fingers. "It's warm. It's not supposed to be warm," Travis whispered, confused and suddenly sober. He pulled his hand back, and I saw the cubes shine wet in his palm, slick in a way ice shouldn't be. He looked down at the floor drain, at the little puddle gathered around it, and his hand started to move. "Don't touch the drain, don't." I barked, catching his wrist before he could do it. He jerked like I'd shocked him, eyes wide, breathing fast. The clicking in the walls kept its steady rhythm. The murmur under it sounded closer now, not louder, just nearer, like it had leaned in. He fought my grip, not to hurt me, but like his body wanted to complete a task. I dragged him back toward the sink, but one cube slipped free and bounced across the tile. It skittered right to the edge of that puddle and stopped. Steam curled up as it melted too fast. Travis stared at it like it was a fuse. The cube touched the water. The puddle went perfectly still, smooth as glass, and the reflection changed. The overhead light stretched into long white bars running down a hallway that wasn't there. Pale walls, doors spaced evenly, a clean floor that looked too polished for any bar. Far down that hallway, something shifted, a darker shape turning as if it had noticed us. Travis dropped to his knees, not from slipping, from pulling, like something had hooked him. I hauled him back by the collar, hard enough to choke him, and he made a strangled sound. His hand reached for the puddle anyway, fingers trembling, desperate. "Back up. Look at me," I told him, pulling him away from the water. I kicked the cube away from the puddle, then shoved Travis toward the back sink and cranked the faucet on full blast. Water roared into the basin, loud, cold, real. I shoved his hands under it and kept them there, rinsing the slick melt off his skin. I kept the water contained to the sink, keeping it off the floor, keeping it from pooling anywhere. The hallway in the puddle wavered like a bad screen. The doors blurred. The dark shape at the far end stopped moving, like it had hit a limit. Then the reflection snapped back to the bar's ceiling light and dirty tile. The clicking softened. The murmur thinned out, like it had lost interest. Travis sagged against the counter, shaking. "That wasn't right. That wasn't right," he muttered, shaking like the cold finally found him. I didn't answer. I wiped the floor dry until there was no shine left, no puddle to catch the wrong kind of reflection. My phone read 1:20. I watched the seconds crawl. At 1:21, I turned the porch neon back on and restored power to the jukebox. The world loosened. Not safe, just less sealed. I could hear the distant highway again, a low hiss returning like permission. Travis slid down to sit on the floor with his knees up. His eyes stayed on the drain like it was waiting to open again. I stayed on my feet because sitting felt like surrender. A clean, metallic click sounded from the back hallway. The walk-in cooler door. Every muscle in my body went tight. Rule 2. Lock it. Don't look. I walked down the hall keeping my eyes on the handle and the lock bracket, not the glass. My hands shook, but the key went in and turned. The padlock snapped closed. Something hit the door once from the inside, hard enough to rattle the handle. Then it went still. I backed away without ever looking through the window and returned to the front with my heart punching my ribs. The rest of the night was survival by routine. We stayed in the main room under the bar lights. I kept the doors locked. I kept Travis where I could see him. When he had to use the bathroom, I walked him there and waited outside, listening for any change in sound. But nothing else escalated. That almost felt deliberate, like whatever it was had already gotten what it wanted. Proof that it could reach through if we gave it the right opening. When the sky finally started to pale, the light bled in around the curtains and the bar looked like a bar again. Morning traffic picked up on I-10. Birds started cutting the silence with small, sharp calls. I unlocked the door when it was bright enough to trust my own eyes. Travis stood slowly, stiff, and walked out like he didn't want to turn his back on the room. "It knows your name," Travis muttered on his way out at first light, not even looking back. Morning came in thin and gray, the kind of light that made the bar look tired instead of cozy. The neon still buzzed outside, but it didn't feel like a sign anymore. It felt like a battery running down. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the last few hours moving in small circles behind the bar, wiping the same spots, listening to the building breathe. Every time the coolers kicked on, my shoulders jumped. Every time the wind hit the porch roof, I waited for another click from the back hallway. Travis was gone, but the night didn't leave with him. The smell of warm ice and that sweet chemical bite still seemed trapped in the air no matter how many times I scrubbed. My hands felt raw from soap and hot water. I kept seeing that puddle go still, the reflection turning into something clean and bright that didn't belong in a bar bathroom. And I didn't let myself think about what was at the end of it. Thinking about it made my stomach twist. I checked the floor drain once more and then stopped myself. The tile was dry. The drain was normal. If I kept staring at it, I'd start seeing things that weren't there, and I didn't trust my own brain anymore. I kept the walk-in cooler locked and stayed away from the window and the door. I didn't touch the jukebox. I didn't touch the porch neon. The laminated sheet sat face down on the bar like it was watching me. A little after 6, tires crunched on gravel outside. One vehicle, slow. Headlights swept across the curtains and shut off. A door closed. Footsteps on porch boards, steady and familiar. The front lock rattled once from the outside. I went to the door and unlocked it, keeping my body between the opening and the lot. Caleb stepped in like he'd just left for a smoke. Same plain shirt, same unreadable face. He carried a travel mug and a paper sack that smelled like breakfast. He glanced at me once, quick, like he was checking if I was bleeding. He set the food on the bar and took a sip of coffee. The way he moved made it clear this was routine for him. Not the coffee, not the opening. Me standing there after what happened. I felt my throat tighten. I'd been saving the words for daylight, like daylight made them safer. "What the hell was that last night?" I said, and my voice came out rough. Caleb didn't blink. He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't say Travis's name. He didn't even look toward the back hallway. "You want to live? You follow the sheet," Caleb said quietly, like it was the only rule that mattered. That answer made my pulse jump. It wasn't an answer. It was a lid slammed on a pot. I wanted to push harder, but I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't going to talk about it. Not in the daylight, not ever. He wanted the bar to look like a bar and nothing else. He watched me for a second, then reached under the counter and pulled out a thick envelope. He opened it and showed me just enough to know it was real. Bills. A lot of them. Not a check, not a promise. Cash. He slid it across the bar like he was paying for a part. "I'll bump you to 800. You keep quiet," he insisted, eyes hard and tired. 800 a night made my stomach drop in a different way than fear did. It was too much. It was the kind of number that meant there was a reason nobody wanted the job. I stared at the envelope and felt my hands shake, small tremors that wouldn't stop. And Caleb didn't rush me. He let the silence do the work. After a moment, he spoke again, still not explaining the nightmare part, only the practical part. He told me he was trying to sell the place. He said buyers wanted clean stories, clean books, clean reputations. A bar on the frontage road was already a hard sell. A bar with rumors was dead in the water. He said if anyone started talking, if people started showing up to see it, if cops got called, if it turned into a thing, then no buyer would touch it. He wasn't asking for loyalty. He was buying silence. I thought about the business card in my pocket, the calm voice, the week-long deadline. I thought about going back to town with no job and no plan, calling Grant to beg for more time, hearing myself sound weak. I thought about coming back tonight and locking the door behind the last customer, feeling the air change again, being alone with whatever lived in the rules. I could quit right then. I could throw the keys down and walk out into the morning and never come back. I could also end up owing a man with a spotless G-Wagon money I didn't have. My mouth went dry. I forced my breathing to slow and kept my eyes on Caleb, not on the hallway. One more night. That's it, I muttered, not convincing myself as much as I wanted to. Caleb nodded once, like he'd already assumed that would be the outcome. He didn't thank me. He didn't make a speech. He just pushed the envelope a little closer and started moving through his opening routine, flipping on a few lights, checking the register, acting like the world made sense. So I took the cash and slid it into my pocket with the business card. 2 pieces of paper with sharp corners, both making it harder to breathe. Then I stepped outside into the cool West Texas morning, stared at the empty stretch of frontage road, and told myself I only had to survive one more night. I went back that second night because the envelope in my pocket felt like a leash. $800 was more money than I'd ever made in a single shift, and it still didn't feel like enough, not after what I'd seen in that drain. I told myself it was simple. I only had to get through tonight. One more night, then I was gone. The lot was busy again when I pulled in. Gravel dust swirled under tires, headlights swept across the porch, doors opened and shut with bursts of laughter. From my truck I could hear the thump of the jukebox and the buzz of the neon. That normal noise almost calmed me. Inside, it was just a bar. Warm air, bodies, spilled beer, cheap lime. 2 men argued over pool. A couple sat close and quiet. A group of ranch hands held the bar, talking about fences and weather like nothing bad had ever happened here. Rena worked the taps with tired precision, eyes scanning, hands moving, never wasting a step. I kept myself busy, wiped tables, gathered empties, took trash out early so I wouldn't be stuck later. Each time I stepped onto the porch, the desert air hit my face like dry paper. The highway hissed beyond the fence, steady and far. Nothing felt wrong while people were still inside. The building had a normal heartbeat when it was full. When someone laughed, the corners stopped feeling sharp. When bottles clinked, they were just bottles. I watched the clock anyway, because my body didn't trust the calm. Around midnight, Rena slid down to my end of the bar with a towel in her hand. Her eyes stayed on my face longer than they had the night before. "You good tonight?" Rena asked, watching me a second too long. "Yeah, I'm good," I said, and it sounded like a lie even to me. She nodded, but it wasn't agreement. She went back to pouring drinks, and I went back to wiping a clean table like it needed me. I kept my hands moving until my knuckles ached, because if I stopped, my brain would replay the puddle turning into that hallway, the far end shifting like something had noticed us. The crowd thinned slow. Last call came. Tabs closed. The last customers drifted out in pairs and small groups, stepping into the gravel and headlights. The front door shut with a heavier sound than it should have, and the latch settled with a click that made my skin tighten. Rena killed the music at 1 on the dot, and the sudden quiet felt like cold water. She grabbed her bag and walked to the staff door. No small talk, no goodbye. The door clicked shut behind her, Deidre and her footsteps faded off the porch. The bar changed. It sealed. The air got thick, like the building had inhaled and held it. The highway hiss dropped away until it felt miles farther. Even the ceiling fan sounded muffled, like it was turning in a different room. The hum of the coolers became the loudest thing in the world, steady and electrical, and it made my teeth feel tight. I locked the front door, flipped the sign, pulled the curtains tight. I checked the bathrooms fast, lights on, lights off, stalls empty, no boots under doors. Then I walked the room and collected anything glass, anything that could break and make me jump. I wiped the bar top dry until it squeaked. I made sure the sink was empty. I made sure the floor near the drain stayed bone dry. I wasn't going to give it a puddle to work with. When I finished, I stood behind the bar and looked at the clock. 1:07, 6 minutes. At 1:12, I put my hand on the jukebox power switch and the breaker Caleb had pointed out for the porch neon. I stared at the minute hand like staring could keep it honest. At 1:13, I killed both. For a few seconds, it was only darkness and cooler hum. The bar looked thinner without the neon glow pushing through the curtains. The bottles behind the counter turned into dark shapes. The air felt colder on my forearms, like the room had lost a layer of warmth it didn't know it was wearing. Then the clicking started, soft at first, like nails tapping a table in the next room. Not random. Measured, it settled into a steady rhythm that made my teeth ache. Under it, a thin static hiss slid in, and a voice tried to form inside the hiss, not loud enough to understand, but clear enough to feel. It carried the cadence of instructions, the way someone reads a list, calm and certain, like there was a right answer and I was about to choose wrong. I stared at the back hallway. The walk-in cooler door sat there, its small window dark, the padlock hanging where I'd left it. I hadn't touched it all night. Still, the handle gave a tiny twitch, just once. The padlock bumped the metal bracket with a quiet tick. I moved to the curtains and lifted the edge just enough to see the lot. Most of it was black now. Still, I saw a white curve at the far edge of where the neon used to reach. A white cowboy hat. The figure stood near the ranch fence, perfectly still, facing the building. It didn't sway. It didn't look around. It just waited. The longer I stared, the less the distance felt real. Like the space between us was a suggestion that could be revised. I let the curtain drop and forced myself not to go to the door. The sheet didn't say fight. It said don't step outside. It said call a number. I had no service. The phone might as well have been a brick. My ears popped slightly, like pressure change. The cooler hum dipped, then returned. The bar felt tighter, smaller, like the walls had leaned in. The jukebox speaker crackled. It shouldn't have. The power was off. Still, the speaker crackled again, then cleared like a throat. "Matt, open the cooler," the voice said through the dead jukebox, calm and certain. My mouth went dry. The name made it worse. It knew exactly which hook to use. "Bring the ice bucket," it insisted, like it was giving me a routine task. The padlock on the cooler rattled once, metal on metal. A clean click answered from inside the door, like the latch had released. The handle moved a fraction, then stopped, like it was testing the slack. Outside, the white hat figure leaned forward a fraction, enough to make my stomach drop. The clicking in the walls kept time, patient and steady, like it could do this all night. I took one step toward the hallway, then stopped. I could feel my legs trying to obey. That scared me more than the voice. I forced my feet to stay planted and stared at the breaker panel door near the bar. I pictured the sheet in my head and the only line that had actually mattered so far. If everything hits at once, kill power. The voice waited. No anger, no threat, just certainty. The cooler clicked again. The ice machine thumped once, waking up. A sweet chemical smell slid into the air, faint but sharp, like warmed cleaner. The neon outside flickered even though I'd killed it, a weak pulse bleeding through the curtains. One brief red-orange blink, then darkness again, like a signal trying to find its way back. That was when I understood I couldn't outlast it with willpower. It wasn't trying to scare me for fun. It was trying to steer me. It wanted a door. It wanted me to open it. "No," I said, and my mouth went dry. The white hat figure took another small step, still keeping most of itself in darkness. The cooler handle jerked once, hard enough to make the door shiver. The jukebox hissed like a grin. The clicking sped up, and for a second it sounded like counting without numbers. Something inside me went clean and cold. I wasn't brave. I was cornered. I crossed to the breaker panel, yanked it open, and found the switch labeled "Sign." My fingers shook so hard I had to brace my hand on the metal frame. The label above it looked smudged, like someone had rubbed it too many times. I hesitated. Then the cooler clicked again, and the neon gave another weak pulse through the curtain seam. "You can have the dark," I muttered and yanked the power like I was slamming a door. Everything died at once. The exit sign stayed, a dim red glow, but the hum of the coolers cut off mid-note. The clicking stopped like a tape cut. The jukebox speaker fell silent. Outside, the last weak pulse of neon vanished. The silence after the cut wasn't normal. It was absolute. No highway hiss, no wind, no building hum, just my own breath and my heartbeat, loud as a drum. I stood there with my hand on the breaker, waiting for pushback, waiting for a bang on the cooler door, waiting for footsteps on the porch. Nothing came. I backed away and crouched behind the bar where I could keep the hallway in sight. The cooler door was a black rectangle now. The ice machine was a dead shape. The drain was invisible, and I was grateful for that. The darkness felt thick but neutral, like cutting the line had made the building forget what it was supposed to do. Time passed in the dark. My legs cramped. My eyes watered. I kept my breathing slow, like sound itself might invite attention. Once I thought I heard the faintest click again, and my whole body went rigid, but it never repeated. It was just my brain hunting for patterns. Eventually, thin gray seeped in around the curtains. Dawn, slow and careful. The highway hiss returned first, faint and distant, then steadier. The pressure in my ears eased, and the bar didn't feel sealed anymore. It felt like a room again. I waited until the light was strong enough to see the tops of the stools. Only then did I stand and move, slow and stiff, toward the breaker panel, ready to bring the place back to life long enough to hand it over and walk away. The clock behind the bar claimed it was after 6, but time hadn't mattered in the dark. I stood at the front door and watched the thin strip of parking lot through the gap in the curtains, waiting for the sound I knew would come. Tires on gravel, one vehicle. Slow. When it finally happened, it didn't surprise me. Headlights swept across the curtains and shut off. A door closed. Footsteps crossed the porch boards with steady weight, not hurried, not careful, like the person already knew what they'd find. The front lock rattled once. I unlocked it and opened the door only as far as I needed to. Caleb stood there with a travel mug in one hand and a paper sack in the other, like he was bringing breakfast to a normal job. His eyes flicked over my face, then passed me into the room. He checked the bar before he checked me. Like the bar mattered more. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him. The air outside was cool and clean compared to the beer-soaked warmth inside. Caleb set his mug down on the bar and looked at me with the same steady, empty expression he always wore. No sympathy, no shock, just assessment. "You make it?" Caleb asked, like he was asking if the coffee brewed. I stared at him for a second too long. My body was still full of leftover adrenaline, but under it, something had hardened into certainty. I didn't want another envelope. I didn't want another rule sheet. I didn't want to bargain with a place that could change the rules whenever it felt like it. I reached for the apron hanging under the bar. The fabric smelled like sanitizer and lime, like a dozen nights of spilled drinks and rushed wipe-downs. My hands moved slow, deliberate. I folded it once, then again. Neat edges, the way you fold something when you don't want your hands to shake. Then I set it on the counter between us. "I'm done," I said, and this time my voice didn't shake. Caleb didn't react. He didn't argue. He didn't even sigh. That told me he'd seen this before. People lasted a night, maybe two. Then they either left or they didn't get the chance. I felt Grant Hollis's card in my pocket again, the stiff corner pressing into my thigh. The reminder that my life outside this bar was still waiting, still demanding. I thought about the week deadline. I thought about my savings. I thought about how easy it would be to tell myself I could do one more night, earn one more envelope, push the problem away. Then I pictured the white hat moving closer in the dark, the cooler handle twitching. The voice saying my name like it owned it, the way my legs had tried to obey before my brain caught up. "I'm not coming back," I told him, keeping my eyes on the door. Caleb's gaze held mine for a beat, then slid away like he didn't want to make it personal. He nodded once, small, almost polite. "All right," Caleb muttered, like he'd already expected it. He picked up the apron without looking at it and set it aside, like it was just another tool he'd put away. Then he reached behind the bar and pulled out the laminated sheet. He glanced at it, quick, like checking a lock, then tucked it back out of sight. The motion was casual, practiced, and it made my stomach turn. The rules weren't a joke to him. They were inventory. He didn't remind me about keeping quiet. He didn't have to. The silence was part of the deal the moment I stepped inside this place. I could feel it in the way the bar looked the same in daylight, like nothing had happened. I could feel it in the way the desert outside looked innocent, scrub and fence and sky, no hint that the night could bend it. I walked out without waiting for him to open up. The morning air hit my face like water, cool and dry, carrying dust and faint exhaust from the highway. The gravel lot was empty except for Caleb's vehicle and mine. The ranch fence beyond the lot cut the land into straight lines. In the clean light, there was no white hat, no shadow standing too still. Just brush, distance, and a sky that acted like it had never done anything wrong. That almost made me angrier than the fear. How easily the world covered itself. I got in my truck and sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. My shoulders ached. My eyes felt gritty. My jaw hurt from clenching all night. I pulled Grant Hollis's card out and stared at the simple black print. His name looked the same in daylight. Solid. Certain. A problem I could understand, even if I didn't like it. I started the engine and pulled out, tires crunching loud in the quiet morning. I took the frontage road back to the on-ramp and merged onto I-10 with the sun climbing behind me. The highway stretched ahead, straight and familiar, and the steady movement settled something in my chest. I didn't make plans in detail. I didn't need to. I just knew I'd find another job, one with normal pay and normal problems. I knew I'd call Grant and work something out, even if it meant swallowing my pride. What I knew for sure was simpler than all of it. I wasn't going back to Coyote Lantern.